A is for Aristotle, a 4th century BCE ancient Greek philosopher. Aristotle made significant contributions to pretty much all fields of knowledge, from metaphysics and biology to ethics and politics. He's best known for his book Nicomachean Ethics, in which he sets out his theory of virtue ethics. Aristotle believed that humans are rational animals, which clearly demonstrates he wasn't familiar with British drinking culture. Besides, I'm pretty sure a cheeky half isn't what he meant by golden mean. B is for Berkeley, a 17th to 18th century Irish philosopher. Berkeley was one of the Big Three, so named for their importance to philosophy and not dick size. He's best known for his immaterialism, which denies the existence of the material world and argues that all that exists are ideas in the minds of perceivers. He's also famous for Americans pronouncing his name wrong. Just get it right, it's not hard. C is for Camus, a 20th century French-Algerian novelist and philosopher. Camus wrote about the absurdity of human existence, our desire for meaning in a meaningless universe. His book The Stranger and essay The Myth of Sisyphus explore ideas of rebellion, freedom, and the human condition. Faced with an absurd universe, Camus thought that the best thing we could do was whatever made us not want to succumb to the absurdity and kill ourselves. I guess C also stands for cheerful. D is for Descartes, a 16th to 17th century French philosopher and mathematician. Descartes is known for his book Meditations on First Philosophy, in which he systematically doubts all the things he believed to be true, such as whether his senses were telling the truth, whether he was dreaming, and whether an evil demon could be tricking him into thinking he existed when he actually didn't. I know you existed, Descartes. That's why I have to study you and the bollocks that you wrote. E is for Epicurus, a 4th to 3rd century BCE ancient Greek philosopher. Epicurus was one of the first atomic materialists, who suggested that the universe was made up of individual atoms with unchanging qualities. He was also a hedonist, and believed that the pursuit of pleasure was the key to a good life. Unfortunately, he wasn't the let's have a 3-day bender kind of hedonist, more like the let's eat some cheese but not too much kind. F is for Fanon, a 20th century Martinician French philosopher and psychiatrist. Fanon is best known for his contributions to post-colonial theory, critical race theory, and existentialism, particularly in his books Black Skin, White Masks and The Wretched of the Earth. Fanon explored the psychological effects of colonialism on both the colonized and the colonizers, and discussed issues of identity, alienation, and dehumanization under racial oppression. Man, having Fanon as your psychiatrist must be rough. He'd give you an existential crisis and tell you all the ways you're oppressed in one session. G is for God. While not a philosopher as such, God has played a fairly important role in philosophy since before philosophy even started. Omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, what can God not do? Except potentially lift a rock that's too heavy for him. The concept of God has inspired philosophers and theologians from ancient times all the way down to the present day, and has never once caused disagreement between different groups of people, ever. H is for Hume, an 18th century Scottish philosopher and another of the Big Three, although this time it may well be because of dick size. Hume is most well known for his works, A Treatise of Human Nature and An Inquiry Concerning Human Understanding, where he questioned well-established concepts like causality, personal identity, and the existence of miracles. His philosophical contributions also include Hume's law, which states that one cannot derive an ought from an is, and Hume's fork, which distinguishes between relations of ideas and matters of fact. He also wore this cool little hat. I is for Ibn Sina, or Avicenna, a 10th to 11th century Persian philosopher and polymath. Ibn Sina is one of the most influential figures of the Islamic Golden Age. He's well known for integrating Aristotle into Islamic theology, his distinction between essence and existence, and his arguments for the necessary existence of God. He also practiced medicine on the side, so there's a good chance he could heal your physical illness as well as your metaphysical crisis. J is for James, a 19th to 20th century American philosopher and psychologist. James is regarded as the father of American pragmatism. His books, The Will to Believe and Pragmatism, argue that truth is a matter of practical consequences, or usefulness to human experience. He also wrote the book The Varieties of Religious Experience, and between his nitrous oxide use and belief in the supernatural, he probably had a fair few religious experiences himself. K is for Kant, an 18th to 19th century German philosopher. Kant is most famous for his books Critique of Pure Reason, in which he sets out to unite the empiricist and rationalist strands of philosophy, and Groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, in which he sets out his moral framework of the categorical imperative. Kant's moral philosophy tells us our human reason gives us access to universal laws, such as that lying is wrong. So here's a top tip from Kant. If your girlfriend asks you whether she looks fat in a dress, morally, you have to answer yes. L is for Leibniz, a 17th to 18th century German philosopher and mathematician. Leibniz is perhaps best known for his theory of monads, which he presented as indivisible fundamental units of reality that possess both physical and mental properties. He also invented calculus at the same time as Newton, and proposed a number of rational principles which influenced modern symbolic logic. He's also well known for his argument that we live in the best of all possible worlds, which I would probably argue as well if I had a chocolate biscuit named after me. M is for Marx, a 19th century German philosopher and economist who has never once been misinterpreted by anyone to further their own political ends. In his book Capital, Marx examined the dynamics of class struggle, alienation, and exploitation under capitalism, and argued that it would inevitably be overthrown by the proletariat. Top marks in theory, still not convinced about how it works in practice. N is for Nietzsche, a 19th century German philosopher. Nietzsche is most well known for his discussions of nihilism and how it can be overcome via the Übermensch. In his works Thus Spoke Zarathustra and Beyond Good and Evil, he introduced other key concepts such as the will to power and eternal recurrence. Notably, Nietzsche also killed God, which makes him the only philosopher to have murdered another entry on this list. He also had a killer mustache, which is perhaps what killed God in the first place. O is for Ockham, a 13th to 14th century English philosopher. Probably better to keep this one simple. P is for Plato, a 5th to 4th century BCE ancient Greek philosopher who basically started Western philosophy. He founded the Academy, the first modern university, and wrote a number of books which have all become certified hood classics in the philosophical community. Perhaps his most influential are The Republic, in which he introduces the world to philosopher kings, and Phaedo, in which he sets out his theory of forms. The question I want to ask Plato is why he had so many people chained up in a cave. Q is for Quine, a 20th century American philosopher and logician. Quine is most well known for his attack on the analytic-synthetic distinction. He argued that there is no distinction between analytic truths based on reason and synthetic truths based on experience, and conceived of all human knowledge as connected in a continuous network. Quine also thought that all truths can be revised, including maths and logic. So if you've ever made a mistake, don't worry, it's not wrong, it's just revisable in a Quinean sense. R is for Rousseau, an 18th century Genevan philosopher. Rousseau argued that humans are born free, but become corrupted by society. Basically, he thought that we're all decent people deep down until we create a Twitter account. His book, The Social Contract, argues that a social contract is needed to restore our freedom. Somehow, I don't think a blue checkmark is going to achieve that. S is for Sartre, a 20th century French novelist and philosopher. Sartre is most well known for his existentialism and his book Being and Nothingness, which explores ideas of freedom, authenticity, and responsibility. Sartre argued that humans are free to create our own essence through our choices and actions, but that we bear ultimate responsibility because of our radical freedom. So that thing you keep putting off, that's all on you. Totally your responsibility. There's literally nobody else to blame. What are you doing? Why are you even still here? You know what needs to be done. Why aren't you doing it? Is this really the essence you've chosen to create for yourself? T is for Thomson, a 20th to 21st century American philosopher. Thomson is known for her influential paper In Defense of Abortion, which uses the thought experiment of a violinist to argue that abortion is morally permissible, even if one agrees that the fetus has a right to life. However, her most important contribution to philosophy is undoubtedly her work on the trolley problem, without which we wouldn't have any of the trolley problem meme videos. U is for Unger, a 20th to 21st century American philosopher. Unger is most recognized for his skepticism, particularly in his book Ignorance, A Case for Skepticism, where he argues that nobody can ever know anything about anything. Not even Descartes' supposedly undoubtable piece of knowledge, I think therefore I am. So if you ever feel clueless about the world and your place in it, don't worry. Unger says you're on the right track. V is for Voltaire, a 17th to 18th century French novelist and philosopher. Voltaire wrote in almost every possible literary form, from plays and poetry to novels and essays. His best-known work is his novella Candide, which takes the absolute piss out of many accepted philosophical ideas of his day, including Leibniz's assertion that we live in the best of all possible worlds. If he were alive today, he would probably roast philosophers on Twitter if he wasn't too busy writing 2,000 books over his lifetime. W is for Wittgenstein, a 19th to 20th century Austrian-British philosopher. Wittgenstein ended his first book, Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, with the line, "Whereof one cannot speak, thereof one must remain silent," a brilliant piece of advice that philosophers have ignored ever since. In his later book, Philosophical Investigations, Wittgenstein argued that meaning comes from how words are used in language, the particular language game we happen to be playing. These two books completely contradict one another, so if you ever can't make up your mind about something, it's good to know that philosophers can be exactly the same with their whole philosophical systems. X is for Xenophanes, a 6th to 5th century BCE ancient Greek philosopher. Xenophanes is most well known for his rejection of the anthropomorphic depiction of gods in ancient Greece. Instead, he introduced the idea of one single omnipotent god, which is, well, rather popular today. Y is for Young, a 20th to 21st century American philosopher. Young is most well known for her book, Justice and the Politics of Difference, in which she argues that mainstream theories of justice often overlook structural inequalities and the lived experience of marginalized groups. Young also introduced the concept of the 5 faces of oppression: exploitation, marginalization, powerlessness, cultural domination, and violence, which sounds an awful lot like the powers of a realistic American superhero team. Z is for Žižek, a 20th to 21st century Slovenian philosopher. Žižek is most well known for his use of Lacanian psychoanalysis and Marxism to critique pop culture. In his works like The Sublime Object of Ideology and Living in the End Times, Žižek examines how ideology has the power to shape society in subtle and unconscious ways. Famous for his lisp, his nervous tics, and his odd demeanour, perhaps the weirdest thing about him is that his ideas actually make sense. And there you have it, folks, an A to Z tour of philosophy's biggest names, and some of the most influential ideas that have changed the world. If I've left out your favourite philosopher, well, what do you expect? There's only 26 entries on this list, and most of them are dead white men. Go and read a book or something. Goodbye!